Let's pray. God, we thank you for a great community. We ask that you would be with us here tonight at this meeting. And Lord, as I entered, I saw a Christmas wreath reminding me, Lord, of the crown of thorns that you wore. I pray that you'd help us each to be reminded that you've called us to be servants. I pray, Lord, that you give each council member wisdom on how they can best serve those in their community and their area. Lord, for those that are moving on in the next year, we thank you so much for their service to this council and to our community. And we know they will continue to make positive improvements in our community. We just ask, God, that you would be with those in need in our community. We know that with inflation and budgets and people are worried and scared and having issues. So we just ask, God, that you would help everyone to be a good steward with what you've entrusted them. Help us to do what we can to enrich lives. So just pray your blessing upon this meeting, and may you just continue to guide our great city of Fergus Falls. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll call this meeting December 5th, 5:30 council meeting to order, and roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Yeah.
Here.
Item number C on the agenda, we have approval of the agenda. I'll return to Andrew to see if we have any additions or corrections.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Council members, no changes this evening.
Okay, that's a first in a while, so very good. Item number D, public hearings, public hearing for housing.
You do have
We want to approve that. I'll offer a motion to approve it.
Thank you,
Your Honor.
Mr. Fish. We have a second.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pull same sign. Motion's carried. Appreciate that. First meeting I've done this, so I apologize. Item number D, public hearing regarding the housing tax rebate for 1026 Verlin Lane. And I'll turn to Claire Beck.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. You have all of the information for this request in your packet. This falls under our tax rebate program, which we have been part of since 2020. It runs through 2024. This is a request for a single-family home to be built with a value at this point in the process of $520,000. As a reminder, if they are approved, they would get a rebate on their City of Fergus Falls taxes for up to $5,000 or up to 5 years, whichever comes first. And I can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Claire, for the update. Do we have any questions for Clara? Seeing none, then I'd like to open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak to this, please come to the lectern, state your name. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And do we have any questions for staff or Clara?
I'll offer the resolution.
Thank you, Jim. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tom. Any other discussion?
I would say that maybe with the kind of beginning of the new year, we could get a summary of what we've done and then, have discussion about the continuance of this program or how we want to continue it. And we might as well do it in the new year.
Bring that to a committee.
Yep. So we do have a resolution before us. Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Item is approved. Item number E, awarding of bids. Have anything under that? No? Item-
It's within the consent agenda tonight, that's records.
We have nothing under petitions and communications. We'll move on to the consent agenda. I believe it's on the screen in the council chambers for those that are in here. We have it in front of us. Do we have any?
Item number 7, Your Honor.
Did you want to remove it?
If we can.
Anything else on the consent agenda to remove? If not, we'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Brent. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. You want a roll call on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. We need roll call, please.
Wonky,
Yes.
Rupert,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Arneson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
Item is approved. Item number 7, we'll go back. Motion directing the city attorney to draft an ordinance addressing THC product sales. I'll turn to our,
I think my question as much as anything is that we have it down then for a first reading, and I think we should sort of like talk about what the changes are, you know, to get some clarity around kind of following up from the discussion of the committee of whole. So I wonder if we can go over what the changes are from.
You want to do it now, or do you want to do it?
I would say we'd do it probably at the same time as the first reading.
Okay.
So if we can move just that discussion to the same point of time.
Yeah, you can move item 7 to the first reading and pass a first reading with a motion directing me to draft
Yep.
the ordinance. That's fine.
Okay. All right, we'll move on then to item number H, ordinance and resolutions. Number 1 is the first reading ordinance 34, 8th series shoreline management.
I'll make that, Your Honor.
So we just need it introduced unless
Yep.
there's questions or comments.
I'll introduce it.
Thanks, Anthony, for the introduction. Item number 2, first reading ordinance 35, 8th series THC product sales.
Yeah. As I think of the committee of the whole, Councilmember Kwame kind of brought up that he would like to kind of hear from the chief police. I think I would like to kind of hear those comments. If,
You want to start us off, Clara?
Yep.
then-
Yeah, I'll just going to do some quick background to remind us all where we are and why we are here. So, Minnesota Laws 2022, Chapter 98, Article 13 allows certain edible and beverage products infused with THC to be sold in the state of Minnesota. In Fergus Falls, at least 2 businesses are already operating or plan to operate based on the on that legislative update. So, in response to questions received from businesses in the summer of 2022, city staff approached council about local regulation. Staff had initially at that time suggested a moratorium to allow for study and discussion, either with council through planning commission or both. Council at that point in time was not in favor of a moratorium, and in an effort not to over-regulate, decided to have planning commission look at it from a zoning lens. So city zoning now restricts THC sales and manufacturing to just specific business and industrial zones. Otter Tail County, kind of around the same time frame, decided to pursue a countywide moratorium on THC sales by enacting an ordinance relating to the sale of THC within city limits that establishes licensing and rules, sales management controls, checking identifications, enforcement, compliance checks, license fees, and addresses other regulatory issues. The city may have the option to opt out of any county moratorium. A county moratorium timeline is still unknown at this point, but we are staying in contact. So you saw an initial draft of a city ordinance relating to THC sales on November 30th. So based on discussion during that meeting, a newer draft was put into your packet for tonight. That contains some of the smaller changes, including a change from sales allowing people age 18 to sell, to moving that to 21, along with a couple other changes, including some optional language for some stricter enforcement if rules are broken. So you had also at that meeting expressed interest in hearing from our Chief of Public Safety. So Chief Bergen is here this evening to provide his office's suggestions for the ordinance for inclusion in a draft for a reading to be held when appropriate. So that's kind of the background, why we are where we are, the point in the process that we are at, and then I'll invite Chief Bergen up to provide his input.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. So I made this little matrix here for everybody to kind of follow along with, but and I will just note that some of the, especially when you get down to the business fine amount, that was the original language. That's what's in there currently. As you look further down your sheet, you'll see that's what the recommended changes would be. But I thought this would be a good starting point so that you could take a look at what other cities in our area were doing. I think that if you look, our ordinance is very similar to both Moorhead and Alexandria. From what I understood at maybe the committee of the whole meeting, there was some questioning on sampling and maybe sale in restaurants or liquor establishments. I would recommend that those be prohibited at this time. And let me just say this too, this is just a starting point for us. It's not to say that somewhere down the road this can't be changed. I would just maybe say it's easier to take a more restrictive approach at the beginning and see how things play out, and you can always ease some of the restrictions. But anyways, as we go through this, you'll see that again, we are kind of in alignment with what the city of Moorhead and Alexandria are doing. The next thing is licensing fee. You don't necessarily need that tonight for the, if you decide to have a first reading tonight, you don't need to establish that fee. But $275 is what you charge currently for a 3-2 liquor license in town, and as you can see, Moorhead charges $750. You as a council should decide where you feel an appropriate fee is as we move forward, but you know, I would say something in that range is appropriate, or if you go right down the middle, you know, you're probably in line with Alexandria. I'll just I think when we get to business violations, I think in the original ordinance it talked about the $100, $200, $400 fine. If you go down to where I talk about subdivision 12, paragraph B, parens 1, that increases the fines to $500 for the first violation for the licensee, not the employee necessarily. $1,000 for the second, plus a minimum of a 5-day suspension and up to 30 days for a second offense, $2,000 fine and a minimum of 10 days suspension, or up to 60 days for the third offense. That is pretty close to what we have in our current ordinance as it pertains to alcohol. So again, trying to be consistent between the two. The other changes, Claire mentioned the one. I would add the language, no person under the age of 21 shall produce, manufacture, or sell any licensed product. Some of the biggest concerns that I got from the community was just how do we ensure we're, you know, doing what we can to keep it out of the hands of people under the age of 21. I think making that change is, you know, we're taking it to the furthest level that we can to try to ensure that it does not. I would also add the language, no person under the age of 21 shall be allowed to enter or remain on the premise of a licensed establishment. And again, just no different than our liquor store. If you're not 21, you should have no purpose inside the store if you're not of age to purchase. Under licenses, subdivision 3, paragraph L, I think it needs to be more clearly stated in our ordinance that no license shall be issued to the holder of an on or off sale beer, wine, or liquor license or any restaurant. On-site consumption prohibited. Again, it's in our ordinance. I think that sentence needs to be added just to clarify, no person shall distribute samples free of charge or for nominal costs on the premise. So it says in our current ordinance that you can't consume the product on the premise. I think both Alexandria and Moorhead took the further step to define that no sampling would be allowed on the premises. And then the last part has to do with licensing. It is in our application, but I think it should be also in the ordinance to talk about limited liability corporations or limited liability partnerships and corporations. Both Moorhead and Alexandria require that the background investigation be done on anybody that has 10% ownership in an LLC or a corporation, as well as the license holder or the manager. I think that that language should be incorporated. And then the final thing is that anybody that's currently selling under the state law has 90 days upon passage of our ordinance to come into compliance, so that they would need within that 90-day window to get a license from the city to sell the products and be a licensed retailer. So those are the changes that I've proposed. I guess if you have any questions or comments, I can try to address them.
Thanks, Chief, for all that information. Do we have any questions for the Chief?
I've obviously got one. I would think that as we charge $500 for kind of a rental registration, to my mind, I think, that would be a more appropriate than kind of, it's like, my concern is that ultimately if we have to do all the things in the ordinance, which we want to obviously do checks and things like that, there's going to be a cost to that. Tonight we're saying that, even the annual renewal for, an apartment's going up by basically 25% because we can't cover costs. So I think, the program should at least be somewhat self-funding. I think that, adopting what Kyle is saying is probably the way that we should go. Because I think it's easier to ratchet it down than it is to come back and say to somebody. But also, Alex is actually charging $3,600 on the one that I pulled off today.
That might have been their draft. So,
Okay.
And I will say this, the questions that you guys have are not uncommon. I know Alexandria and Moorhead, it was quite a lengthy process. But I think originally both Moorhead and Alexandria had asked for considerably higher licensing fees, and ultimately they landed on the $500 and $750. The other thing I'll say is, this law was already passed. It kind of snuck through the legislature. There wasn't a lot of control of the cities on this. And unfortunately, I think we're going to revisit this issue, maybe in June as, there's talk by the governor and others within state government to pass more marijuana laws. So I do think it's inevitable. We're going to have to deal with this, sooner or later. I think that this, even though this is hemp-derived THC, I think the ordinance that we look at passing is probably going to be the foundation for whatever other ordinance that we pass regulating THC in the future. And like I said, I just think at this point it's maybe more prudent to take a little bit of a more restrictive approach. You never know what the new laws are going to be, and we can kind of adjust as time goes on. But I don't want anybody to think that whatever gets passed here today is set in stone and it's never going to change, because I think we all know that these ordinances do change over time.
Go ahead, Brent.
I talked to him earlier about this, and I agree with everything on here, and that's about the only way that I would agree to it. The one other concern that I have that I would like to see being done, and I talked to him about this a second ago, is I'd like to see a file starting to being kept over the next, because it's too early to tell from what the sales are now, that how many of our police calls are going to increase. You know, domestics, just anything with the use of this product, and which could going to increase our police outcome. So I'd like to be able to have something kept up on that, especially, you know, coming later this year with the possibility of legalized marijuana. You know, I'd like to be able to have this kept so we can look at the point is, I mean, if we have to raise fees down the road, we're going to have to recoup our cost from the additional police calls.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Scott.
I wanted to make sure I understood Anthony's suggestion or question regarding the license fee. Were you suggesting a $500 license fee
Yep.
or something more or less?
Yeah, I was thinking that we charge 500 for a property rental registration. So, yeah, and we argue that that's, you know, barely enough to cover costs. So, I think that would be a more appropriate fee for this.
And I don't argue that. I just was thinking we need to pick a number. The suggestion that Kyle has presented is between $275 and $750.
500
So
in the
if we're
middle.
going to pick a number,
Yeah.
there you go.
Your Honor, for just for reference, that number's not actually going to go in the ordinance itself. It's going to go into our fee schedule, so you guys can evaluate that on a more consistent basis without having to go through an ordinance process. So you can think about that number, and we can. The plan was if we get to a second reading on this, we'll have a separate action to have you memorialize that as part of the fee schedule. So you can think about that more, but just to reiterate that we can be flexible with that number as our needs, you know, change or our costs. So
Good. So, go on.
Len's got a go ahead, Len.
We did have a business that took out this license already for the next year, and we would just make sure that we would credit that $100 that is now towards their 2023 license.
Who was first?
Scott.
Go ahead, Scott.
So then if we were, just as far as how the process would work, if we wanted to adopt the suggestions that have been presented to us by Kyle that are essentially the red print, or is it all of the red and the black that's below? How would you say?
The red print is the changes, I guess, and with the exception of the black print for the
LLC.
licenses, subdivisions for the on sale, off sale, and then same thing with the LLC.
So then just the language that's been presented, I guess, not regardless of whether it's red or black, if we wanted to incorporate that into the ordinance, we would need to pass, is it a motion or a resolution then to make that?
My suggestion is you can either do that, pass a motion directing that be incorporated, and then this come back to you as a first reading, or you could offer this as a first reading with the conditions that the second reading would include those additions that Kyle discussed, and the second reading would have all of that included and incorporated into a final proposed ordinance that you would review and take action on at the next council meeting.
I think it would be good to offer it as a first, that you basically offer Kyle's suggestions and then we get the first reading. I'd like to see it in its form rather than kind of being, in the second reading, being the final document. I think it's only fair that we should have the final version as the first reading, not an adapted one.
Then offer a motion directing that I incorporate Kyle's suggestions to the change the ordinance, and it'll come back as a first reading at the next meeting.
That's exactly what I said.
Do we have a second to that?
I'll second that.
Do we have any other discussion on this? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Item number I, presentation of claims. in the amount of $3,457,546.84. And I will turn any questions to our Finance Director, Bill Sonmore.
I'll offer the resolution to pay the bills.
Thank you, Jim. Any second?
I'll second.
Caroline, thank you. Any other discussion or questions? If not, roll call, please.
Tony,
Yes.
Rupert,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Ernst,
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
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 Motion's approved. Item number J, Board and Community Department reports. We do not have anything before us this evening. Item number K would be reports from staff and administrative officers. First thing is our 2023 budget and levy presentation, and that has to be at 6 p.m. or later, so I did not do a very good job in delaying the meeting until then. So
I should have asked, but we can go to number 2.
can we go to number 2?
The MOU between, oh, no, that one, sorry, no.
We can go to 3, right?
No,
Nope.
because they're all subject to passing the budget.
So, anybody sing?
Miscellaneous announcements.
What do we do? Just
Later.
Just sit here and wait for 6.
Chief, you had more time.
Well, Lynn, should we key it up and we'll make sure the
Yep.
works?
Oh, we only have 3 minutes.
This clock is,
You only got 2.5 minutes.
5:57.
We don't have that, we don't have that much.
we don't have that much.
No.
So it really comes down to counting.
We hired this kid who's 6 feet 8 inches tall. Thank God, now we don't have to go get the ladder every time the clock is.
We're here to correct you, you know that.
They called him Stretch.
I was just saying to Caroline.
Jim and I tied. Yep, Jim and I tied.
6:45, he's gotta leave by. He's gotta leave by 6:45. 6:30.
We'll be fine.
Just talk like a chipmunk real fast.
Well, page 1 and 2 you can start.
Skip them.
On page 1 and 2.
Bill,
I mean, that's,
jump to
I
page
know,
10.
you could spend a fair amount of time on page 1 here.
yeah.
Bill, did you bring popcorn?
I did not pop. No pie,
No pie.
no pie either. Just pie charts.
Pie.
Carolyn.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Oh, yep. They all step in for Krista tonight.
It's sad.
Yeah, it is.
I never said I was a comedian.
You just stick to your day job.
Ward 1 spends the most
I'm with
money.
you on that.
And yeah, I do think he's one of the funniest people.
That's because he's so dry.
The bar's not real high.
Come on, guys.
That's just because I think our sense of humor is probably similar.
It's just good.
Yes.
You in a club or something?
Well, so Andy's dad
I
used to
assume we
think that I
will.
was stuck up because I didn't always laugh at his jokes, and so he thought I didn't understand them. But really, it's just that he didn't think he so, and I told him that once, and he thought that was very funny.
If there is that enthused.
We were good on that. Said I'll laugh when I'm stressed.
Yeah, yes.
Every citizens and everybody else is
What?
staff. Or new council members.
Yours says 6.
Right?
No, not you.
It's up to the boss up here.
Just time that right.
6 o'clock, Bill.
All right, it is, going by that clock, which is 5 minutes slow, so it is 6 o'clock on the button. We will go to item K, reports from staff and administrative officers, 2023 budget and levy presentation. Take it over, Bill.
All right, thank you, Your Honor, City Council. Good to be here tonight and getting to this point of the year. We put a lot of time into this. We start in about the month of May is when we start talking about the budget. And you can see through the calendar here, we're here tonight to do our presentation. Then we will open that up for the time for the public if they wish to speak to this. It's also state law that we start at 6 p.m. or later for that purpose. So that brings us here tonight. So again, this is the same slides, most of them what we had in September, but our assumptions. What have we built into this budget? We have wage increases. We have several unions within the city, and we have settled contracts. So for 2023, 2.9%. We already know for 2024 what we'll be budgeting with then at 2.8. Health insurance, 6.58. Electric, 7% is the estimate we worked out with Otter Tail Power back in the summer when we were putting this together. City utilities, we're putting in 4 for our own that we're doing. Natural gas, we did double that and add 10%. And then our insurances, we work with the League of Minnesota Cities to come up with those assumptions as well. So you can see these are our inflationary cost drivers that we're seeing, in addition to equipment costs, fuel costs going up as well. So in total, we have proposed revenues for 2023 of $51,253,693. Expenditures, this will be the number that we'll be asking a resolution at the end of this to approve of $50,899,563. Proposed tax levy of $77,631,550. That's an increase of $573,050 or 8.12%. And so that's the actual change in the dollars of our levy. Then we look at the tax rate and how did that change. We work with Otter Tail County to calculate that projected rate there of 53.851, and that's a decrease then of 8.77%. So our levy is going up. The 8.12 is what we're proposing, but the actual tax rate would be going down. And of course, that relates to all the changes in valuation. Certainly one, if there's new construction in the city, that adds to the pie that we spread the levy over. But as you all are well aware, businesses, homeowners everywhere, the valuations went up significantly. And we did have the county assessor in during the year to talk about that as well and explain that whole process and how that works with state law as far as valuation. So it's all related to when valuations go up, then our levy as a percentage of that changes too. So that's why the swing there. So that levy number is what I'll be asking you to approve as well. So here's that total budget broke down by fund. Again, our general fund is the general operating fund of the city. That is, city administration, council, police, fire, streets, park and rec, community and economic development, communications, engineering, streets, all that falls under our general fund. Special revenue funds, they have dedicated revenue sources to fund those. The big ones in there would be the public library and the Port Authority fall within there. Among others would be our tax increment districts and tax abatement districts. Debt service, those are where we make our bond payments. Capital projects, that's where we build the projects that we construct, as well as we have permanent improvement revolving funds within there where we collect the funds to then transfer over and make the debt service payments as well. Enterprise, we talked about those at our last council meeting about when we reviewed the utility rates. Those are run more like a private business. Property tax dollars do not go into enterprise funds. They're based on user charges. That's your liquor store, the water, sewer, storm, refuse. Those businesses. Internal service, that's our internal equipment fund. The customers of that are the other departments of the city. So this fund owns all the equipment and rents it out to the other departments. Just a pie chart of where the revenues come from for the city of Fergus Falls. And this is all funds of the city, including the enterprise funds. The charges and the sales are the largest source, and that's because that includes all those utility funds and the liquor store, as well as various charges that come into the general fund. Intergovernmental at 22%. That's our local government aid being a big one in there. And also when we receive state and federal funding for projects that are in the capital project fund and in the airport fund show up there as well. One we'll talk about is the RTC preservation project we just talked about last. The revenue side falls into that bucket of intergovernmental. Property taxes then, the levy we're talking about tonight, is that 13%. So you can see out of the whole city where these funding sources come from. And then we have a pie chart also of where the city expenditures fall. And certainly, large area being capital outlay, we talked about the various projects we build. So we put the capital project in at the total. You may have bond sources or something else on the revenue side as well. We are very much a people-driven organization. Our people use equipment to perform services for the residents. So you can see on the upper right-hand side of that, the wages and benefits area. So a very large area of city government. Here's our proposed levy. Back in September, we came to you with $7,650,000. The tax levy committee, who is composed of Councilmember Fish, the mayor, and our city administrator, have decreased that. We did comb through the budget since September. Yeah, we didn't cut it much, but we cut where we could to bring that down a bit here to $7,631,550. That's where that 8.12% levy increase comes. We wanted to point out also that within the property tax levy, we have these levies for tax abatements. So they're used for economic development for these various projects. And basically, these levies are capturing that value of those abatement properties for a time period, much like tax increment when we've talked in the past. So we'd like to point out within the tax levy, we have various abatements here. So what are our cost drivers? So levy supported funds, this is basically the general fund, the public library, and the Port Authority. So those funds that are mainly supported by property taxes. We have our labor costs going up 2.9%, equates to about $256,000. Health insurance, $90,000. Workers' compensation, that 13% increase we're estimating at $97,000. Utilities, this has our electric, city, and natural gas for $106,000. The communications manager position that we added, the levy portion of it, because we do spread that over a few funds of the city, but the levy portion is $33,000. Equipment rental, so for that internal fund, $40,000, which we'll be talking more about that in the future as we're seeing our equipment costs really increasing much more than the 3% we put in here. So 2024, we'll talk more about that. Tax abatement programs going up $30,500. That would relate to the housing rebate program that we have implemented. We just talked about that one at the beginning of the meeting tonight. So our total fixed costs would be a driver of $652,000 or 9.24. So you can see we're actually doing less than what the drivers are. So the tax levy committee decreased elsewhere, did some departmental combinations to bring that down some. Now, other things that are in here, we have the compensation study. The levy fund impact is $109,000 here. Total citywide for this phase of that step in is maybe around $123,000. And that will come on the agenda after the budget presentation. Streets, overlays, and seal coats. You as a council have had that as a priority of putting increases into our annual maintenance. This is a 10% jump on that again. So that's $41,080. So how does the property tax system work? Otter Tail County Assessor determines the market values. We've talked about that. Property class rates are established by the state of Minnesota. The class rates are then applied to that market value. You as a city council set the levy, that's that bottom left box. That levy then is divided by the tax capacity to come up with the rate. The rate is multiplied times that individual tax capacity on a homeowner's bill. That's how you get to your tax bill. Here's just a chart of that levy that we've talked about and that tax rate, and you can see how, the levy is going up, the tax rate decreased there. This slide just shows what is the estimated tax bill then on a home of $200,000 or a business of $500,000. You can see that at $974 for a $200,000 home. That's the city portion. And then a business of $4,981. We show the tax rates here and the tax rates of the other taxing jurisdictions, pretty much all of them decreasing. So going from a total of 119.053 down to 107.159. I will point out that the last payment for the annexation of Woodland Heights was made in 2022, or the phase-in. So now in 2023, the Woodland Heights will be at the same tax rate as all the rest of the city. That's been phased in then in 2023. Okay, taxes and state aid. We've talked about this a bit. You can see the levy there amount again. Local government aid, we'd like to point out we're dependent on local government aid of $3.8 million. That's just going up slightly at $28,000 or 0.75%. And then of course, the various state and federal funding that comes in for the various capital projects. Here's just a chart of local government aid, what that's done over the years since 2002. You can see really pretty stable there. We, of course, would like to see larger increases in local government aid for the city. General government, we talked about the communication manager position. Departmental combination, planning and GIS became one. We did not replace the planner, and so we saved some funds there. We are using some fund balance, projecting that for the Bigwood Event Center for 2023, as we're still trying to get that back up to at least a break-even scenario we would like to see in the future. IT, we have some phone system and computer updates, the mainframe, talked about Woodland Heights, the street projects we already talked about. And since we have City Hall on here, I'd like to point out we do put capital outlay aside in our various buildings, be it the library, fire hall, the police department, City Hall. So we are taking care of existing buildings. Public safety, the police department budget at $4.4 million. You can see the number of officers and staff and equipment. Same for the fire department at $895,000, and with some of their statistics there as well. Streets and highways, talking about that 10% increase again for maintenance, brings that to just about $453,000 for 2023 for the maintenance projects. That's within the general fund. We also have other street projects in the capital that are some reconstructions, some different overlays there. Street lighting, phase 3 is not in this budget. We'll have to talk about that in a future year. Parks and Rec have some stats there on, serving nearly 7,000 participants, 29 parks, and a $2 million budget to do all that. And then pointing out again, phase 1 of that riverfront project was complete, and of course it's been used a lot and has been great. Just this last weekend it was used. So. Economic and community development, we are maintaining the funding for Greater Fergus Falls at $50,000. We've talked about some of those tax abatement districts on a previous slide. We have several TIF districts as well. And our tax abatement levy will be at $54,000. And as of the time I put this together, 46 approved home. Now it's 47, right, Clara, with the one from tonight. Port Authority, their levy is staying at $60,000, so no change there. Continue to collect the money from the state for the CBHH facility and Lakes Country Service Co-op for the level 4 education facility. So those facilities are self-sustaining through the state and Lakes Country. And then the Port Authority did agree to fund the next year's levy requirements for the dairy demolition loan and cleanup revolving loan to try and minimize a levy there. So we're not levying for those yet. And the Port Authority is in the process of working on the RFP process for development for that project. So that's kind of the hope, is to minimize any levies there for the dairy project. Public library at $990,000 budget. Property tax levy making up the majority of that, and then some regional library aid that flows through Viking Library as well. There's some of the 2021 data. I know you've seen that in the past as well, and Gail does a nice job updates each year of what's happening at the library and the stats there. Bigwood Event Center, as you know, the city has owned that. We constructed it in 2000, was operated through contract management with the hotel in the past, but through COVID, closed down. We did reopen in 2022 under city management. We have a manager out there doing a great job for us now and getting those bookings in, and so that's why I said we are looking at putting money over from the general fund for 23, but hopefully when we get towards 24, that will start looking up as far as revenues covering our expenses. Capital projects, here's the list of some projects we're hoping to get done next year. They'll all come back to the city council when it's time for bids and whatnots, but Union, Stanton, Broadway, the Summit, Lind and Laurel area, I know engineering, you're working on that in-house, right, on the design of that one. Sidewalk program, that's our annual program, the RTC preservation project that you acted upon. And then the Riverfront Phase 2 over here, which we've got those bids already accepted as well. Then our enterprise funds, this just shows a snapshot, liquor store and the operating income. After that operating income, we transfer sizable amount of funds into the general fund to reduce property taxes. The refuse fund, you can see operating income here as well of the $366,874. We went through these in detail, so I just put a snapshot on the bottom of what the rate changes that we were recommending with that utility rate study. So 3% in the collection fees and changes to the bypass rate from 25 to 31. Remember we talked about the mattresses and all that going out and the bypass out to Gwinner, North Dakota. Car and truck tires going from 4 to 6, and then the loading free from 10 to 15. I will point out the 2022 in all these columns is the budget. So we're comparing budget to budget. They look a little bit different than the scenario we showed you where we came up with where we think we were ending. Sewer enterprise fund here, same thing. We're showing a big operating loss in 2023. That is very much an anomaly because we have moved the demolition of the old wastewater treatment plant into 2023. That's not constructing a new asset, so it flows through the income statement of an $800,000 estimate at this time. So that's why that's an anomaly there. That would swing back as we look back in 2024. But we are looking at a 4% in flat and flow charges there included within this budget. Water fund, 3% we're looking at in those, and again, we covered those at the last council meeting. Stormwater, I have on the next chart showing that $1 increase, and then that goes up in this, 2 and 4 for commercial and large commercial. Then our equipment fund, unchanged from what we had in September, and again, we're only doing a 3% there. We'll look at that with a little tougher eyes for 2024, I'm sure. So the next steps, we've shown where we have been. Tonight, here we are. I'm presenting you this budget. We'll ask you to, allow any public to speak after you counsel if you have any questions. And then by December 28th, we need to get our final levy to Otter Tail County, get that certified to them. So that is the end of the slides.
Well, thank you, Bill, for that presentation. Council, do we have any questions for Bill while he's at the lectern? Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, Bill. Just so that it's a little clearer to understand, on the enterprise funds, or the funds that are run like a business,
Yep.
refuse and stormwater and all of those, you pointed out how we had the one anomaly on the sewer fund. Typically, when we've got income on all of those various funds, that income, what typically happens with that? It's essentially in savings and used for future projects, correct?
Yep.
It's not just burned up in the year that it's used or that it's gained, right?
Right. We so within all these funds, we actually book depreciation. So you have your water plant that is worth X dollars. You're going to depreciate that over a number of years. We cover that. That's a non-cash expense. So we're covering that in our rates for replacement, but that's at historical cost. So we also look with our rate studies, and we were going out through 2031, we inflate those numbers as well, because what we built 20 years ago is much more expensive 10 years from now. So we look at the depreciation, we look at what it's going to cost us, what projects are coming. But all those funds, like you're saying, stay in that fund to be used for the sewer fund. You're not going to pull sewer fund money out and use it, in the street department. They are dedicated and segregated purely for the sewer fund to cover current year operations, plus future capital replacements. And then you like to have reserves so that we have funds for if a well goes down at the water plant or we have some emergency, we have good reserves as well too. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. As far as generally what happens with it, and then specifically with the sewer fund, then the cost of this demolition, is it more than 800,000, but only 800,000 is going negative in this particular year because we're using some of what has been saved before?
Nope, that's the estimate we have right now in our capital improvement plan is an $800,000 project. Now, we've had that number in there for a little while, I think, haven't we? Couple, 2-3 years maybe? So we'll see when we actually get the project put together, we get bids. It could be more, it could be less. We'll see where that comes in, but our estimate is 800, so I dumped that all into the expense line. Now, in 2024, we won't have an $800,000 expense in there, so we'll get back more in line. That's why that's an anomaly, and I wanted to point that out, that we have the cash in the fund to make that payment.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's the answer that I was
Okay.
looking for, is whether this was going to wipe out our...
Sorry, it was a long way me getting there, so you'll have to beat me over the head once in a while.
Oh, that's all right.
Money's in the bank.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this isn't going to completely wipe out what we've got set aside for this
Nope,
work?
we have, north of $10 million in that fund, right, within the sewer fund. And remember, all of our funds are down right now because when we talked about our investments being marked down, so that's down in the sewer. We want those to come back as well.
No pun intended.
I've been so full of good news the last few meetings.
And jokes.
Why was he looking at you?
Thank you.
I'm the acting mayor.
Yeah.
Good question, Scott. And I also want to just maybe reiterate thank yous to the team. I was on it in 2020, I believe, and there's a lot that goes into the process, but also in 2020 we were sensitive to increases because of everything that was going on in the world. And so, part of being really conservative back then means you're going to have maybe a little more bump down the road. And so we're seeing some of that now, but still a very good job on coming back with a fine tooth comb. So thank you for you, Bill and Sandy and Andrew and Jim and the mayor for doing that.
I think
And anybody I missed.
one comment would be that I think there's a lot of misconception about our impact in the county, and I think you have to kind of look at your property tax statement and decipher, what is county and what is city, and I think that is confusing because a lot of the time the bottom line goes up, but it's and unfortunately you have to address it with the county because they change the value of your property, and that is often the bigger impact on why your city portion went up, because the county moved the valuation of your house up.
Good point.
Yep.
And online too, we will have the more detailed kind of budget book that we put together for this. And like you said, has some of that history in there of what was the levy over the last 3 years. So, and it would show the year when we held it stable, no increase. So thank you for mentioning that. We don't put that much detail into the slides, but it is out there on our website as well. So
Yeah. Anybody else have what, Scott?
Just stretching.
I thought maybe you were raising both hands. You really wanted to...
I got tons of stuff to say.
All right. You had mentioned earlier that the streets are something that have received a lot of focus. A lot of people are very interested in that. And I guess I wanted to also then make a comment as far as the clarity of how we approach that. To say that we've increased what we're going to spend by 10%, that's what's dedicated for maintenance. So 10% of 400-some thousand, you end up with 40-some thousand. And that 10% sounds like a good step. A couple years ago, we were looking to go 20%. That was a better step, maybe what people were looking for. But as opposed to what you would see as capital improvements, we got less than 4 million in capital improvements this time around. And if people were looking to see a 10% increase in that, we'd be looking for $400,000 more of actual construction, more than just maintenance. And I wonder if sometimes people haven't been expecting that kind of sizable jump, $450,000 increases rather than $40,000 increases, because, there's only so much we can do with 40 grand.
That's a really good point, because if we're going to make big strides like $400,000, $500,000, $1 million strides in increases in street funding, we need another funding source for that, or the levies would go up significantly for that. So that's some of that discussion of where do we go from that? Because cities are funded through basically, property tax levies, intergovernmental revenues from state and federal funding, and then user charges for water, sewer, refuge, stormwater. That's cities' funding sources. So you bring up a really good point that, like Union Avenue up here on this slide, there is federal funding and state funding in that, I believe, right? Same on Broadway, I think, is also federal and state. If we didn't have federal and state funding in these and needed to fund that completely locally, that's a much different discussion. Now, we have lots of miles of street within the city that are going to need work on them too. But again, we need those other funding sources as well.
As far as the specifics on this list here, I believe that this last year, had we not also intended to do Lincoln downtown? And I don't see that on this list. So did that fall off going forward? Or is it included in that?
First one there. The biggest one.
So it's in there?
So that's part of the Union?
Union
and
Lincoln.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Tim,
That's
you
what-
comment?
I just want to say that this whole thing starts 4 months ago, when they asked for the budgets from all the departments. And they come in, we start looking at it at that point. We also asked the council what they would like to see in there or not see in there or what have you. And from there, then they go back to the departments and say, hey, do you really need this? Do you really need that? Is there something we can take out to try and get this down? And I think, personally, I think we've done a very good job, because what we're actually going up is less than what our expenses are going to be this year. So it was a tough year. The last time I was on the budgeting committee, we went zero. And this is, to me, a big jump from that zero, but it's where we've got to be to run the city.
Yeah, as you see, we're not throwing in a lot of new things. This is more keeping things going of what we are doing and what we do have.
Well, good conversation. Thanks, Bill, for giving the update. Now I'd like to open up to the public. So we'll open up, and if you'd like to comment on anything, please come to the lectern, state your name and your address, and give us your comments. Seeing none, I'll close that period, and we'll go to item A on the agenda, B, resolution adopting the 2023 levy, and we're looking for that from the council. I'll offer that, Your Honor. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Brent. Sorry, he had his...
That's fine.
Brent. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Kwame,
Yes.
Rupert,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ferguson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number C, excuse me, resolution adopting the 2023 budget. Looking for a resolution.
I'll make that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'll second.
Thank you, Caroline. Any other questions or comments? If not, roll call, please.
Kwame,
Yes.
Rupert,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
Ferguson,
Yes.
Gustafson,
Yes.
Hicks,
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 2, resolution entering into a memorandum of understanding between the City of Fergus Falls and the Supervisors and Professionals, Inc. bargaining unit. Mike will kick that off.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I come before you again this evening to request that the resolution be approved, and that basically is the new pay scale that is going to be devised out of the budget that you just approved going forward for that particular group. That would be the supervisors and professionals group.
Mike Davis.
I'll make that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Anthony. Second line, Caroline, thank you. Any questions for Mike? Thanks, Mike. Roll call, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Item number 3, resolution entering a memorandum of understanding between the City of Fergus Falls and the Minnesota Teamsters Public and Law Enforcement Employees Unit Local Number 320.
Same applies to this group. That would be your authorization to approve the wage scale for the Teamsters group as presented.
I'll offer that, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. And item number 4, a resolution approving non-union employee wages for 2023 and 2024.
That is as it states.
Pretty clear.
I'll offer that.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Scott. Roll call, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Rupert.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Ferguson.
Yes.
Gustafson.
Yes.
Hicks.
Yes.
Fish.
Yes.
That resolution is approved. Thank you, Mike, for all your work. I know it's not easy year to year, and getting these in and get them done is wonderful work. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
To my knowledge, there's no old and unfinished business that we need to take up this evening. No new business, and so miscellaneous announcements. December 14th at 7 a.m. will be our next committee of the whole meeting in the council chambers. December 19th will be our next city council meeting at 5:30 here. December 26th, reminder that all city offices and facilities close for observance of Christmas holiday. And then January 2nd, 2023, all city offices and facilities will also be closed observance of New Year's Day. And nothing before us tonight. We will close our meeting. Or end our